Hello, hello, hello.
Good afternoon, morning, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. Welcome to the On Right Show.
Bienvenue.
Hello.
Pour le français. Welcome.
We've got Deb here taking a bit of time for building her bombing shelter or whatever it is. Or you were saying, Mark, it's a little bit weird in the States at the moment.
In terms of what?
Well, everything that's going on, I suppose. But
it is. But I don't talk politics.
No. I don't blame you. Neither do we.
Okay.
Right. So I'll do a couple of intros because I think you're handling the beginning bit. I think, Wendy, is that right? So Carolyn was first. Carolyn Harris, hello there. Deb, hiya, Deb. Jennifer, Spiritual Vegans here. Amelia Lees, a well-known name who'll be coming back to the show soon.
Great.
We've got the Ape. Jeremy is here. Keystone Eon, and that's it. Right. Okay, that's it so far. A little bit of housekeeping, I suppose I ought to do as usual. The best chat is on my YouTube channel. If you're tuning in on Facebook, we can see your comments, but you won't be able to have the full experience, as it were. So if you want that, then my YouTube channel is best. And in terms of commenting in general, just go ahead with that. We don't make people pay to comment. We don't believe in it. Right, so that's that bit done. Wendy.
Yes. Hello. Well, do you know what, Mark? I don't know if you realise this, and I don't know if Nella and Roger realise this, but it's pretty much 2 years to the day-ish of the last time Mark was on the show. It was, I believe, February 2 years ago. So, yeah. Welcome back, Mark. It's really good to have you back.
It's great to be here. That's a scary thought, 2 years. Wow.
No, I know. It shocked me as well. But yeah, so we wanted to get Mark back, and actually, I think Nelly, it was you originally who posted this article about the wolves, and we said it'd be great to get Mark on to talk about this, and it's something that's happened in the EU, that there was a vote last year, at the end of last year, to downgrade the protection status of wolves, so weakening their protection, and there's a lot of pushback on this, and we have a few things to talk to. We have quite a lot to talk to Mark about, actually. We wanted to start with the wolves, and there are a few little issues about wolves at the moment that we'll get onto, but this was the first one we wanted to ask Mark's opinion, an expert opinion about. So Mark, with this, obviously there's a downgrade. They're still considered protected to a point, but it's not going to be strictly a strict protection as such. And so it says in the article that this is going to open the door to so-called culling.
Murdering.
Obviously, murdering, basically. Murdering wolves as an option to protect, especially, I think it's so-called livestock, it's farmers and ranchers and whoever who are particularly worried about the fellow animals that they're keeping captive that might be killed by wolves and things like that. So what do you think might happen with this change in status? Have you kind of got any ideas of how this might affect the communities of wolves?
Yeah, I mean, regardless of whether it's in the UK or Europe or United States, downgrading or giving less protection is really a bad thing. It just opens up the door for more killing. I know they sanitize it by calling it culling, and some people even go as far as using the word euthanized when these wolves are otherwise healthy. So it's a feel-good move to call it culling or euthanizing. It's horrible. I mean, I never know what more to say. It just opens the door for more killing. And I don't know what it's like in the UK, but here you can pretty much get away with anything, killing wolves or other carnivores. Maybe they'll slap your wrists or something like that, but people don't really get punished for doing it.
Well, here in on the British Isles, as we say, wolves were hunted to extinction. Basically, that there are no longer wolves here. So that's what happens if people are left to do what they want, and that's exactly. And you almost feel like if someone isn't protected, if individuals don't have any protection, that's eventually what will happen. They'll all come to some grisly demise because humans are just so murderous and destructive.
Yeah. Well, that's what happened in Colorado and other places like in Wyoming in the wolf reintroduction program that started in the mid-90s in Yellowstone National Park. I mean, the wolves were killed by humans, and in Colorado, they were killed by humans. So it's kind of a cycle, you know, you kill all the animals because you have inane fears about them, or they don't leave enough ungulates for humans to hunt and kill. And then you cycle back that, oh, we really want them. And so, I mean, I'm very much on the fence or against these kinds of projects, unless non-lethal management, if you want to call it, is employed. So here, you know, I mean, here in Colorado, and I'm just jumping in because it's similar all over the world. There's lethal management, lethal control is on the table, and people can just shoot wolves. And the Colorado Parks and Wildlife and others think that there's enough restraints, if you will, built into the system, and there's not. So people just kill them, and they know they're not going to get punished for doing it. So if you make it easier for them to kill them, you'll just see more dead wolf corpses and carcasses on the landscape.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question about. Sorry, Wendy.
No, that was Nella.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Yeah. Carry on, Nella. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it seems that governments everywhere, and now the European Union as a whole, what they mainly want to do is satisfy their voters and their counting numbers, and they want to satisfy farmers. And here in Greece, they wanted to satisfy hunters. So you can go out and shoot a fox, for example, and no one is going to do anything about it. And although there was a very strong opposition by animal rights organizations and even conservation groups, they voted for this, change in legislation against the wolves. So it seems to me that whatever happens, it's always tied to the fact that we exploit other animals for their flesh.
So you said that some conservation organizations agreed with the downlisting?
No, they didn't agree. There was a very strong opposition, but they decided, the government decided that they had to to satisfy the farmers.
Yeah, I mean,
this is what is about the farmers.
Yeah, right. I mean, so in Colorado, even in Wyoming, because that's what Yellowstone National Park mainly is, and parts in Montana, that they yield to the ranchers and the people who are raising, I hate the word livestock, but I'll use it, livestock, to only then be killed in slaughterhouses, so that's just the name of the game globally, and it's a totally cashing it out in a big picture way. It's really an anthropocentric arrogance, I call it, and that's why I'm such a fan of compassionate conservation, where the life of every individual matters. And that's, I think Wendy knows, I don't know who else knows, but, I've been writing a lot about this for the wolves in Colorado, even before they were on the ground, arguing that the life of every individual matters. But we say that, and, 10 cents or 10 pence will get you on the subway. I mean, no, I mean, really, the people in control just don't listen to that kind of stuff. So in Colorado, for example, last spring, the first breeding family of wolves appeared. a mommy, a daddy, their children, and they happened to den near a ranch or on a ranch where there were cows and sheep. And, it's like room service. I mean, if you want a quick meal, just take it. And the rancher there did nothing to deter the wolves. And Colorado Parks and Wildlife went ahead and decimated the pack. So mommy and 4 of her children were put in cages somewhere. I have no idea where. People think I know where. I don't know where. And the father was trapped. It was a trap and re-release program. The father was trapped and then died after a couple of days being held in a Colorado CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife trap. The bottom line there is they brought wolves here from Oregon to develop breeding families. And the first one in 85 or 90 years was killed off. I mean, they weren't all killed off, but killed off meaning the pack was just decimated to satisfy the ranchers. And I want to be really clear that I think the ranchers do have a case. I mean, I would feel that way if, I mean, I wouldn't raise animals to go to somebody's mouth, but I would feel that way if I only, if I lost animals to wolves. But there's ample evidence that killing wolves and other carnivores doesn't really work. I mean, when you get down to it. So I think what you're seeing in Greece and you're seeing potentially in the UK is just standard operating procedure for dealing with carnivores globally.
Go ahead, Wendy.
No, sorry, you wanted to carry on, Nella. I was just going to make a continuing point.
I wanted to ask Marc to say a few things about compassionate conservation, because to me, conservation organizations or groups seem, at least here, to be sometimes part of the problem, because they don't believe in actual individuals and the right of the individual to exist, but in numbers, and there is a surplus or there is not a surplus and things like that. And that means that they work with gamekeepers, for example. So you have, and this to me is absurd, you have a wildlife organization working with gamekeepers in kinds of emergencies, and they think that this is normal. They don't think that this is something you have to do today because there is a great danger or whatever, and I have to work with the devil. But they think that, getting in bed with the hunters is fine. So
sure,
compassionate conservation is the the solution.
Right. Well, they make, first of all, I don't know what it's like in Greece and the UK, but I'm sure it's the same. They make a lot of money from people buying hunting licenses. So money is the driver. So traditional conservation works on what we call collectives, species populations, for example. Compassionate conservation focuses on each individual's life, their inherent or intrinsic value because they're alive. They don't have to be sentient either. I mean, some people limit it to that, and that's fine. But so compassionate conservation basically takes killing off the table. There's shades of gray in the compassionate conservation movement because, like in Colorado, there are some people who say, no, I'm against killing the wolves, but they've never spoken out in public about it. So if you say, well, I always feel if you're against killing animals, you have to tell people you're against killing animals and live by the word. So there's some people in the wolf community here who want wolves on the ground, but they're willing to trade off the life of, say, 1 or 2 wolves for the good of 12 wolves, just say. It's a really utilitarian type of, baloney, if you will. And so that's what's happening here. And so every time I've written about compassionate conservation in the Colorado wolf reintroduction, I like to call it repatriation. We're not reintroducing wolves who were here. That would be about 10 times their lifespan. But I'm really forcing people, or nicely, to say, if you're against killing, say it. But it's what amazes me, but maybe it doesn't so much, because I was thinking about it this weekend writing something. It's the same thing all over. the world. So really, once again, it's just this anthropocentric arrogance that we are above and separate from other animals, and we can do anything we want. And then when you ask people that, they'll go, oh, no, 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 no. No, that's not it. And I'll go, well, then tell me what it is. And then they mumble with a lot of BS, and you realize that they're tongue-tied and they have no idea what they're talking about. So compassionate conservation would put the life of every individual first and foremost, and slowly but surely we're getting a place at the table in a lot of different countries, about that. But people also have written criticisms of compassionate conservation, but I'm convinced that 90% of the people who criticize it have never read one word in the compassionate conservation literature. And one funny story I tell, because I think it's worth it, is I was giving a lecture in Australia about 10 years ago, and it had some highfalutin title about compassionate conservation, saving individuals, something a little more academic, which of course turned off a lot of people. So at the last moment, we changed the title, Would You Kill Your Dog for Fun? And the audience doubled in size really quickly. The reason I called it that is simply because that's what these people are doing for carnivores, wolves and other animals. They go out and kill them for fun, or they don't like them. And the bottom line I ask is, would you do it to your dog? And then the reason I'm introducing this is because the paper that you had on when I got here that I posted last week with Mary Angeli, and another essay I wrote, was that the emotional lives of dogs and wolves are very similar. And the basic question, would you do it to your dog? And that was actually very popular. It got thousands of views. And I actually had some nice emails from some anti-wolf people who, in the best of all possible worlds, would not want wolves here, saying, I never really thought about it. Those wolves are sentient beings who have feelings like my dog. And so, no, I wouldn't kill my dog. And no, I wouldn't allow my dog to be killed for the good of other dogs. So, yeah.
Marc, I wanted to ask you a little bit about that article in a moment, but just when you were saying that, there's, I suppose, and as animal rights advocates, there's maybe a complication with repatriation or something like that when we're bringing, for example, wolves to an area. We've got a clip in a moment to talk about maybe doing it, here, but. Of course, there's we're saying we don't agree with killing our fellow animals, and that's it, and we need to say that. But I suppose when we're introducing people like wolves here, they are going to kill other animals for sure. So for example, the clip that we're going to see, they're talking about wolves. There's usually a reason why humans want to do something, and often it's they're introducing wolves in order to kill more deers, in order that the deers won't destroy the forest, blah 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 blah. Mm-hmm. So then that brings up the whole ethical question of is this a good thing? Because the deer are not getting asked about this. They have got no consent. They're just going to suddenly find themselves with loads of people, wolves are going to eat them and stuff like that. And it just got me to thinking, if one day AI, which will probably want to get rid of humans at some point, wouldn't blame it really. But if AI suddenly decided to introduce a predator that would kill or keep the numbers of humans down, I wonder how we'd feel about that. Introduce dinosaurs back to the world or something, Yeah. And I thought, oh my God, that could probably happen the way things are going. But yeah, how would we feel? Because it's suddenly we've now got a predator, and we're still oh wow, we've got dinosaurs to contend with now that we haven't had for millions of years. But just a little
no, it's an interesting thought experiment, because I wrote a paper some years ago called The Slippery Slope of Reintroduction Projects. And that was another aspect of it, that your prey animals are going to be exposed to predators to whom they haven't been exposed. And so it would be new to them. You know what I mean? So if you've always had, say, wolves around, let's just simply focusing on wolves, there would be traditional, there would be animals who learn to avoid wolves. maybe through their parents, maybe there might be something inherent. I know people have suggested that there might be something that, is part of the genetic makeup of these prey animals. And maybe there is, but that's another aspect that is very important from an animal protection, animal rights point of view, is that you are bringing wolves into Colorado, and they love elk. They're going to eat elk and deer and moose if they can, and occasionally get room service from a cow or a sheep. But it's really important to remember that you are then increasing the likelihood that the prey animals, the food animals, will be, will be killed and eaten. Yeah. So I'm glad you raised that, because people really kind of, I've had people laugh at me, and where I was going to go before with the compassion of conservation, because it raises some interesting, points that, might be related to what Nella was asking. So at the end of my talk in Sydney, and I was pushing compassionate conservation down there, and because there's a lot of people interested in it down there. This guy raised his hand in the audience, and he said, "Well, that's really interesting, but it's very feminine." And I said, "Thank you." And I didn't say a word, and the audience cracked up laughing, because I think the guy wanted to get into some philosophical, junky argument. What do you mean by or I would ask him, what do you mean by feminine? But the reason I say that is because a lot of people get turned off by the word compassion. And when we first published our series of articles, the editors were, well, at least one editor or two were anything but unbiased. I mean, they came at us really, and they got 8 reviewers for the paper instead of 4 for a series of papers, because it scared them. And one of the arguments they made was that compassionate conservation doesn't favor biodiversity, which is just a load of crap. I mean, of course it does. So anyway, I mean, I could go off on that, but basically, in response to your question, Nella, it focuses on the life of every single individual. First, do no harm, and really the bottom line is striving for peaceful coexistence. And killing animals is just, people say, well, we kill for coexistence. And I always think, well, you kill so you can coexist with corpses, not with live animals. So I'll take the live animals. Thank you.
And Marc, just going back to that, your article. So you've written an article called Coexisting with Wolves. And in it you say, to quote you, discovering an expanded sense of community and kinship beyond our own species is a win-win for all. And I just wonder, how do you think we can help people to do that? How can we help people to expand that beyond our own species?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's embedded in the principle of do no harm, and the life of every individual matters. You can get that off. I've seen that. But yeah, I mean, it just, so wildlife services in the United States, even Colorado Parks and Wildlife, a lot of state wildlife groups will have the word coexistence in their guidelines, but it doesn't exclude the possibility, which is really not the possibility. They are going to kill animals. So I think one way you build your circle of kinship with your wild neighbors is to say that they have a right to live also. And I know people are going to say, well, they don't do this, they don't have feelings, they don't know we're going to kill them, blah, 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 blah. But the point is, if you really make the case strongly that we moved into their homes, so during COVID, so we're in an era called the Anthropocene, the age of humanity, and I call it the rage of inhumanity. And a good example of what would happen is during COVID, when people weren't out on the streets, more animals were coming home. I mean, in Boulder, where I live, we have cougars, we have black bears, foxes, and they were coming close to the town more often. and a group of researchers in Scotland renamed that period the Anthropause, which I thought was just absolutely first class. And what they mean by Anthropause is we're not there. I mean, that's basically it. But the reason I raise that is because it was almost like a controlled experiment for 3 to 4 years, or even 5 years, depending where you live, where when we weren't around, the wild animals came home. And now more and more people are faced with dealing with wild neighbors who weren't there before COVID because they actually like coming home. So I've used that as a good way to keep or rekindle the main message of compassionate conservation out there, that every individual, the life of every individual matters, despite the people who laugh at us, really, and they do.
I really love the concept of coming home. Happened in North Wales. When I lived in North Wales, there was a place called the Great Hall. Mm-hmm. It was near Llandudno. And all the goats came down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was getting calls all the time, or texts, or whatever people use these days, because in West Boulder, maybe I'll change my background in a minute, and you can see. Roger.
It is a lovely background, it has to be said.
Okay, I'm going to do that right now. Settings. What do I do? Virtual background.
Virtual background.
Okay. Oh, wait. How do I get out of it?
There we go. That's it.
Yes. Oh, good. So that's my view, actually. That's what I'm looking at right now. So that would be West Boulder. And there's cougars and black bears, foxes, coyotes. People hike up there. They bring their dogs. And I was getting constant communication from people saying, oh, my goodness, I just saw my first cougar. Oh, my goodness, I just saw my first black bear. So they were really happy. A lot of them weren't happy, or a good number weren't happy, because it meant they had to take care not to bother the animals, blah, 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 blah. But the point being that, like Roger was saying, with goats coming down, people were beginning to see the animals who were displaced, say before COVID, or maybe if you were old enough, you were around Boulder and other places when, in fact, you would see other animals. So yeah, I don't know what to say, because I'm convinced there are certain people who enjoy killing animals. I really feel that way. Or some
people, you're never going to change their mind. They're just just don't care. Actually, just don't care.
Right, Wendy. I mean, in all honesty, I've written pretty much all I can write about the Colorado situation. There's people who agree, but there's people running the show who don't agree. And the decimation of that pack, putting any feelings aside, a number of people raise the fact that, this project in Colorado cost a fortune. And when we got our first breeding family group, they decimated it. I mean, so if you only, if you want to only look at it from the economic side, which of course I would not, and none of us would do, then what a waste of money to satisfy ranchers, and to satisfy a rancher who never did anything to deter the wolves.
And you talk in the article, actually, in your article, about how it's about, and I suppose it's whether if we have the will to do this, we can learn to coexist, because you were talking about, you said about that rancher, he did nothing to, deter the wolves, and he basically had room service there with his captive fellow animals there ready for the taking. And yet if humans had the will and, the intention to do different things, we could learn how to deter wolves, or and create different protocols where we're learning, okay, wolves like to do this, or come here, what do they need, how do we help create fulfill their needs without them coming too close to our our homes and things like that. I suppose it's having that will, isn't it? If humans actually wanted to do something, we could do something. It's just often it's just much easier to kill. It's the same with anyone, isn't it? Like around here, it's rats. Like all of my neighbors are like, oh, there are rats around. Of course, there are bloody rats around. They're, not to say bloody rats, but there's rats around because they live here and it's their home. But it's like, oh, we need to kill them. It's the first thing, right? Let's kill them. But actually, and it's the same as what you're saying about the wolves, actually just going out and killing fellow animals like this doesn't actually make them go away forever. They're still going to come back. Whereas actually, if you learn to coexist in more harmonious ways, then that's an ongoing resolution, isn't it? Whereas killing only solves the issue temporarily. So, and I think with wolves as well, one thing that I wanted to ask you about, and I've kind of lost my train of thought now, but it's to do with how wolves, this was it. Wolves are seen very much as like, I saw an interview with a guy and this woman was saying, oh, how do you feel about the reintroduction of wolves into Britain? And he was saying, oh, absolutely not. I just can't tolerate the fact that there might be an animal out there who could easily kill me. Yeah. I just can't tolerate that. And I just don't want to have to live with that thought in my head. And then actually, when you think about it, and I think she actually mentions this as well, there are lots of our fellow animals who could kill us if they want to. There's an individual who lives in my house who could kill me if he wanted to, and he doesn't. Right. But yet there's a fear. There's like this mythologized fear of like, oh, wolves are going to predate humans and they're going to kill us all, and it's all of that, and they're so demonized and vilified, and that's part of the problem, isn't it, with all of this stuff? Yeah,
I mean, in the United States, there's only been, I think, 2 reports in the lower 48 states of a fatal encounter with a wolf. Literally. They tend to avoid us if they can. A lot of wild animals do. I mean, when a grizzly bear or a black bear or a wolf attacks a human, or a cougar or mountain lion attacks a human, it's tragic. I mean, it just really is. And some people say, well, too bad, we were in their homes. Well, it is. Yeah, I mean, it is too bad, but you can have a heart for the people too. But yeah, I mean, the myths that surround or center on these predators are amazing. So, I always, because I study dogs and I've studied wild carnivores, I'd rather be around a wild wolf than a mad dog. And I don't mean that lightly at all. So they argue, I don't want to be attacked. Well, okay, if you know an animal's there, don't go out. I mean, if you feel that way, and I don't mean that lightly. But once again, killing doesn't work. Other animals fill the empty spot, and there's just no evidence. I mean, the scientific evidence just doesn't support the fact that just wantonly killing these predators really makes a difference. I mean, it's pretty simple.
And actually, a lot of humans are killed by cows.
Oh,
well, there are a lot of human deaths because of cows. And actually, someone I used to know very well got killed by a cow, actually.
Yeah. I'll tell you what's interesting in Colorado, too, is that I think to date, there's 29 wolves on the ground here. And I think to date, give or take 25, say, or 30 cows and sheep have been killed. But in the last couple of months, 200 plus cows have been stolen or wrangled off of ranches, and nobody's saying anything about it. Every now and again, you see it, a headline in the paper. So it's about 8, maybe 10 times the number of cows who have been killed by, say, wolves, because it's been wolves now, have been stolen. So, well, wait a minute, and what that comes down to for me is a lot on husbandry. It's, that there's what we call range riders. They're people who ride around on horses or maybe on ATVs, the off-road vehicles, and their presence can deter their presence can deter wolf attacks. And about a month ago, I gave a talk down in Denver, and we had a range rider there, and he actually has data which most of the wildlife organizations don't have data, or the state organizations or federal, that shows that by having people around, he had a decrease in predation on his cows. I mean, simple, I mean, so, and there's this classic story of a Kenyan boy who some years ago, I think his name's Robert, he didn't want to kill lions, and that was a tradition among the Maasai, and I could understand that. So he just strung up Christmas lights, and it decreased lion predation on the animals who the Maasai were raising. So it's not that hard to do, and they also have these carcass death pits, and you just throw carcasses in of animals who have died of natural causes, and you cover it. So that's all I can say. Yeah.
Two very interesting questions in the one question and the comment in the chat. There's a lot going on. Well, it's really interesting. Caroline is asking about wolf reintroduction, and she's asking were these wolves captive bred, and if not, where are they taken away from their wild homes? Because there are moral implications involving wolves in those scenarios. Who these wolves left behind? Did they leave their families? Did they leave their friends, their community? So how does this reintroduction works?
I'm just looking to see that question. Oh, there's Jack. Yes.
It's Caroline Harris. It's like
I don't know. I am. Yeah.
6:32.
It's on the screen actually, Mark. Look at the bottom of the screen.
I'm not very familiar with the wolves reintroduction, but I'm thinking about ethical issues regarding the wolves' lives. Where are they? Oh, right. Yeah. So I was going to get into this in terms of the slippery slopes of reintroduction. We're right. I mean, we can use Colorado, but we can use Yellowstone in the wolf reintroduction 30 years ago. So these wolves lived wild in Wyoming. Wild in Oregon, the state of Oregon on the west slope. They were trapped, sedated, looked at physically, given like a physical, flown to Colorado, and then let loose in Colorado. And I call it the dump and pray technique, because you dump them out in a new home and you just pray they live. And so one question that people have never paid any attention to at all, and I know this, is what about the packs and the wolf social structure in, say, Oregon? So in English, we say you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So you're taking wolves here against their will. You're flying them here. You're dumping them out in Colorado. And once at a meeting, maybe 20, 25 years ago, I said, so whatever happened to the packs in this case, it would have been Canada, who were brought to Yellowstone, and no one knew. And now, and there's data, and there's been data for a long time that show that when you change the composition of a wolf pack, you also can destabilize it, and the wolf pack may just completely, fall apart. So that's another slippery slope. What right do we have, to kidnap wolves, wolf-nap wolves, move them to Colorado, and then not protect them? I mean, I can't think of anything that's more arrogant than that. Which is why, like I said before, I've just stopped writing much about it, because no one listens to me at the top. I mean, I really mean that. I don't mean that in a self-denigrating way, but I don't want any more wolves here unless non-lethal management is on the table and enforced, and we don't give in to ranchers. Ranchers here can get compensated up to $15,000 per cow. Okay. I mean, and I was part of the I didn't actively partake in the development of the wolf plan, but I've read it early on. And I think it went from $3,000 to $5,000 to $8,000 to $15,000. So they get paid a lot. I'm sure all of us would agree. I don't like putting a price tag on the life of an animal. But you know, that's what I've come down to, is we brought them here. We wanted wild wolves, and then they kill off the pack. And now there's 29 wolves in Colorado, and I can only hope that they all survive. It's just so morally repulsive to bring animals into a state or into another area from where they were living and having a wolf life and not protect them.
Which I think brings us beautifully on to our next subject, Roger. I don't think we need to play that clip anymore because we kind of talked around that anyway. But could we go to the frog one now? Because it ties in really well with what Marc was just saying, actually.
You don't want to do the Scottish wolves now.
Do you think we've already talked about it a little? I don't know if we'll get anything.
We probably have, even though I spent hours editing it and then putting it.
Oh, have you? Oh, you can play it if you want.
No, I didn't. Actually, there was a couple of things I wanted just to very briefly touch on from the article, and I love the way that Marc goes, "I've seen that, get that off," which is
yeah, I didn't say that.
People don't tend to do that with their own work. But
what did you say?
Well, when you said get that off, I've seen that. It was your own work.
It's in the article. But we want other people to see it as well, Marc. We want people to read your work.
We had this on the screen and you said, "Oh, I've seen that, get that off."
Oh, wait, let me come back.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the name of the guy. It's Derek Lowe, I think. I interviewed him. You all should contact him. He's in England. And he's leading the move to bring wolves back. It would be interesting to get his take on it.
Yeah, it's Derek Gow, right?
Gow, not Low. Yeah, G-A. Yeah. I couldn't read my own handwriting. It's G-A-W. Yeah, right. Okay, so what do you want me to do now?
Yeah, so just very briefly, in terms of the article that you don't want to look at, I was intrigued by...
put it on. Put it back on.
No, it's okay. I was intrigued by three kind of concepts which seemed to kind of run like a thread through it. There was the training humans part of it.
Yeah.
Then there was the killing disrupts the pack, which I learned about when I was a SAB in the 80s, because you realize that if you kill one of the parents, for example, then the other parent then might go to the chicken coop rather than, because they've got to get in there and get out because they've got cubs on their own now, that kind of stuff. So it's very disruptive to kill anyway. And then this concept of get over yourself all seem to be linked, that we have to we have to think of the other, be empathetic, and probably be a bit more humble in terms of what we are as humans in relation to our fellow animals than we are.
I'm not even sure where to start. That's at least 4 books.
You better get cracking when you get off the show.
Yeah, you got 5 minutes, Marc. No.
Well, I mean, so I worked. So that paper on we need to get over ourselves. I wrote that with Marlon Reese, and Marlon is the first gentleman of Colorado. He's married to our wonderful governor, Jared Polis. And yeah, I mean, it's a catchy phrase, but once again, when you're arrogantly anthropocentric, you're putting us in the center. So we're trying to decenter humans. It doesn't mean that we're not important. That's another criticism, people. I'm sure you get it too. But it doesn't mean we're not important. But I like to think we're just one of the gang. And so, this getting over ourselves learning to coexist by during the process of rewilding. So these repatriation, reintroduction studies, experiments are really part of rewilding programs, to rewild, to make wild again, to bring back native species, et cetera, et cetera. But we've got to decenter ourselves, and we need to at least try to come to terms with building more symmetrical, negotiable relationships with the non-humans with whom we want to coexist. So seems pretty straightforward to me, and it's going to be a lot of give and take. I mean, it just really is. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not very good at that. So, Wendy, you want to go to frogs, do you?
Frogs. Yes, what a leap from wolves to frogs. Yes, but it really ties in, and it ties in with another subject that we'd like to talk to Marc about as well. So it goes back to what you were saying, Marc, about what right do we have to bring wolves from Canada, for example, to Colorado to mess with all of this. And even we're thinking that, and Amelia's saying wolves in Britain won't happen anytime soon. And I'm sure that's correct, but they are obviously still like having those conversations. And then again, like we mentioned earlier, we might repatriate the wolves, but then what happens to the deer, because we're thinking of the species rather than the individuals, because we're doing that utilitarian thing. Because okay, the wolves can come here because we're going to repopulate the place with wolves, but then the deers are going to be eaten, and other animals will be eaten and killed, but that's okay because there'll still be plenty of those. So it all comes down to those numbers. And we seem to have this thing, and this relates to this article here with the frogs. So for anyone who hasn't heard this story, it's about Darwin frogs who have been under threat of extinction. They're an endangered species, so-called, that are under threat from this lethal fungus that threatens amphibians. And so there's been a mission to go to a national park, or a very remote place, national park in Chile, and take some of the frogs. And they're tiny little frogs, and there's actually a video of it. Do we play a little bit of that clip, Roger? Will we be allowed to?
Yeah, I think so, because it's embedded into this. This is from The Guardian.
I saw this article.
I think we'll get away with it. So if I go back, so this is the trailer. There is I think there's like a 15-minute thing on YouTube already. I had a look at that. That was quite interesting. A Leap of Hope, it was called, as you can see. And this is the trailer for it.
Are the dual ratings available? They stay on the BBC.
You can't even skip these, can you?
Oh. Doesn't everyone just love adverts? Can't stand them.
Okay, good. Oh, I saw this.
It's incredibly impressive. It's almost quite an eerie atmosphere.
It's like finding a little jewel on the forest floor, like an emerald.
We think it's the worst ever described infectious disease of any animal. This is the main cause of extinction of this species.
There's a lot riding on this.
You've got one chance.
Yeah, so they've taken the frogs from Chile and they've brought them to London Zoo, where they've created a kind of obviously they've tried to replicate as close as they can their natural environment, and they obviously wanted the frogs to have children, basically, and that's what's happened. But again, it raises that ethical question: is this is trying to do something really good for this species and not to have them be completely extinct, and yet those frogs being taken from that nature reserve had no choice. They were just taken, put in plastic bags, put in containers, shipped like thousands of miles across the world, and now they're captive in a zoo. So what's your perspective on this, Marc? I'm really fascinated to hear what you say.
Yeah, I saw that article. I get pulled in a lot of different directions, to be really honest. I mean, if the frogs who they frog nap and bring to London and then are killed,
frog nap, I love that.
I'm against it. I just didn't have time to do any more of the research. If they could show that, I mean, it's sort of like the same question. It's an analogous question to the wolf question, is like when you took wolves from Canada to bring to Yellowstone, or Canada just last month to bring to Colorado, or Oregon to Colorado last year, if you could show that there was no effect on the packs in the places from which they were taken, then that would be a check in the box. That doesn't necessarily mean it's okay, but it would be one check in the box. So like I said, it blew my mind that they had no idea that they might be disrupting wolf packs in Oregon and Canada to form new wolf packs in Colorado, who they just basically decimated. So the reason I go back and forth on it is, if they could take these frogs and they could use them, I mean, because they are using them, but I don't necessarily mean it in a pejorative way, because I don't know enough about it, and then return them to their homes, well, maybe that's okay. I'm just being honest. I'm on the fence. I just am.
I think that's what they're hoping to do. Sorry, Mark, go on.
It has nothing to do with that. I think frogs are less sentient or less important. Okay. I mean, for sure, frogs are easier to handle than wolves. I mean, they just are, so I don't know. I mean, I'd need to see a lot of boxes checked before I would agree to it. But I have to say that when I saw that article and I had watched part of the video, these people are very, very serious about it. So I think and I've been, if you will, battling with myself about this for a really long time, because there might be ways to do this kind of work without harming the donors, if you will, because that's who these frogs and these wolves are. They're the donors for future generations. So I don't know, and I see somebody just address. Amelia just said, are they going to address the fungus issue by determining?
Yes, Amelia, that's I think what they're hoping to do. They're hoping to have lots of frogs. They're going to hope to find out how to find a cure, basically, for this. I have no idea what that entails, and that's a whole other ethical topic to be had, isn't it? Testing experiments and all that. I don't know what they're going to be doing to these frogs, but they're going to try to find some kind of cure to help lots of other amphibians and individuals who are going to be affected by it, and then in the future put some of the frogs back into the national parks and out there back into their free living homes.
But the question comes against to the donors. I mean, years ago, so I spent 2 years in a PhD MD program. I partook in a study. I don't have to go through the details of it, but I think I got a shot or something. They did something that caused a little pain, right? I mean, I could deal with it, but I was okay because I can't remember what it was, the details. So that might be okay. But what I love about this program, and I love about these questions, is that a lot of the questions that arise cross species, but a lot also deal with maybe animals who could be used, and I don't mean the word, like I said, in a pejorative way, but could be used in a certain way and then go home again. I mean, that's what I did, and that's what other people do. I know people who have had serious diseases and have partaken in different types of trials, or even healthy people. So, but what I like about what we're talking about now, and it's once again a big topic in compassionate conservation, is you need to look at everything on a case-by-case basis. That's because it raises a lot of questions. So the overarching huge question is, should we be intruding in the first place, regardless of the species? And also,
oh, sorry. No. I just get excited, and do you know what it is as well? Stuff comes into my head, and I have to try and get it before it goes.
Get it out.
Do you know that feeling?
Get it out before it leaves the brain.
It's like, if I don't get it out now, it's just going to disappear. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in on you. But it also makes me think about how we can't ask the consent of these frogs. What would they do? Do you want to be you know, do you want to be a martyr and do you want to come to London, Frog, and do you want to help save the future of your species? Yeah. We can't ask them that. We can't ask them that. But in the same way, I can't ask Fantail Cat or Brine Cat, who has to go to the vets a hell of a lot. He's diabetic and he gets a lot of issues. I was just going to
suggest that for your dog.
Yeah, I can't ask him. I have to get him in a cat carrier, which he absolutely detests.
Yep.
He protests all the way. And honestly, my cat carrier is shit. So I literally have to get a blanket over the back, tip the back of it up, try to get him in, hold the blanket, clip the front. It's really bad. But this whole time I'm thinking, oh my God, he hates this. This is awful. And then he cries all the way there. He won't come out of his cat carrier at the vets. He's huddling in the corner. He's looking up at me with these big eyes, like saying, what are you doing to me? And it feels like a betrayal. Nella, I know we've spoken about this so many times.
I think you're raising, I've lived with countless dogs, and yeah, I mean, I had to make decisions like everyone, and probably most people listening, for your companion animals. You make them with the best intentions, and all the dogs I had when I lived in the mountains ran free. They never had collars. They never had, leashes and things like that. That most of them loved being in the car, because what I would do is I would freeze a bunch of bagels from a local bagel shop called Moe's with peanut butter on them. So they'd get in the car and there would be peanut butter bagels. It was only a 10-minute, maybe 2-kilometer drive or 3-kilometer drive to the vet. But I thought about that because one of the dogs did not like going in the car. She just hated it. I had to make the decision because she was in dire need of medical veterinary care. So I tried to find something that she liked to do. She'd poop in the car, but I wouldn't yell at her. I mean, I was, if you will, handling her and putting her in the car. But the question you're asking is a great one. We're making these decisions without consent all the time. I mean, because of the work I do on dog-human relationships, somewhat on cat-human relationships, is the notion of consent. The two C's, consent and agency, have come up a lot. Does that individual animal, non-human, agree with what you want to do with them or to them? And do they have the agency to choose yes or, to go and not to go? So with one of my dogs, eventually I knew my veterinarian. She lived in the mountains. She would just stop by and take care of the dog. It got to the point where it was just too traumatic. And I thought that, from some physiological disorder that she was suffering from, she'd become a complete psycho. And so she stopped by and could treat her at my house. I'd give her a bottle of wine and the vet was happy. I mean,
not the dog. You didn't give the dog a bottle of wine. Hopefully the vet.
No. So Marc, I want to test your level of speciesism. So if I was in your car and I pooped in it, would you shout at me?
I would probably throw you right out of the rear window.
Yeah, discrimination.
But
I have a question regarding the frogs and the zoos, and I wanted to ask you: do you think that these projects are sincere in the sense that these are funded by the zoos, obviously, and is there a real desire to protect the species, or is it just a marketing, project? So zoos can wash out their same in the same way, and I've been dealing with this here. Zoos are, very eager to lend equipment to wildlife rescuers, for example, in return for good publicity. So what's your take on that?
Well, it would depend on the zoo. I mean, I'm a field worker. I know field workers who might be doing this. I don't know the frog people who sincerely care about the animals, So once again, it gets into, that speciesism, the S word that Roger just suggested, that these frogs, I mean, zoos are notorious for wanting what we call the charismatic megafauna, the big predators and elephants and zebras and, giraffes and other animals like that So I'm not sure that these frogs are going to, I don't know. So I'm going to say your question is a great one, Nella. Are the zoos going to make any kind of economic, are they getting paid? Are people going to come see the frogs? I doubt it. Are they getting money to do the research? Well, they might, because you can't do research without the money. So I like your question, because once again, it gets back to looking at everything case by case. Okay. If they were elephants or they were charismatic megafauna, zoos are notorious for using them. They break up their families. They ship them around as breeding machines, and they're making money off them. They get young polar bears, young wolves, young chimpanzees. They make a lot of money, and then they split them up and ship them all over the place. I don't see that as part of the frog work, but I have to say, because I am a field worker, and I feel I'm part of that group, that I think they really care. And what I love about it is it calls attention to these animals who are kind of sideshows. They're not charismatic. They're not megafauna. They're animals like insects who are vital to every ecosystem. E.O. Wilson once said, if we got rid of all the wolves in the world, it wouldn't make a difference. If we got rid of all the ants in the world would collapse. So I think that, I personally right now would need to know a lot more about the frog study, but I can't be a priori against it until I learn more about it.
Yes, I didn't so much mean the field workers as the zoos, in the sense that they probably need some positive articles perhaps about them, especially in an era when they are used for Zoothanasia, for example. Because in one hand you have the desire to save a species, and on the other hand, they very easily murder giraffes, for example, if they think that they have too many of them.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I don't know if we have time to go to the Zoothanasia topic.
Right. I mean, a few years, well, it could have been a decade or more ago, and I got involved in it, and I didn't realize it was going to be such a shit show, to be honest with you. But some people killed the last of one bird species and brought it to a museum, and it was appalling. And I wrote about it. And of course, 90% of the emails supported me, but the 10% that didn't were putting expletives together in a string I'd never seen before. And I wound up saying, I'm not one of those, so. But what I love about this discussion is it brings you back to the real world, whatever that is, because I find the real world now to be frightening. But it really means that you have to focus on the animals with whom you're working and the question at hand. And I love what your question, Nella, and the motivation of, if you will, the researchers and the zoos. So I'm not going to a priori just condemn it all. There are some really good zoological organizations who have done amazing conservation work. So when people say zoos do nothing for conservation, most zoos do nothing for conservation, but there are some zoos who have funded projects in the wild and didn't bring animals into captivity.
Ironically, I was thinking that was one of the kind of potential downsides. I mean, I'm always reminded of Andrew Lindsay when he said there's no pure land. And so, that thing about it's complicated. The more you know, it doesn't necessarily make it simpler. It probably makes it a bit more complicated. But if you look at the thing on YouTube, the longer one, then London Zoo gets a really good bit of PR out of it, because it did look as though that they were very caring conservationists and all that. So even those kind of things have got to be factored into the equation in a way.
Well, right. But, Gretchen Weiler, some of you may know of her, but she ran the Genesis Awards, and then she became the Humane Society of the United States on the West Slope. She was a former very well-known actress. Her quote, which I use a lot, is "Cruelty can't stand the spotlight." So there's a double-edged sword for a zoo calling attention to themselves. But I definitely agree. But I don't know. I mean, I don't go to zoos, and I don't know if any of you, would go to zoos for any purpose at all. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but, I don't know. I'm just very cautious about throwing the baby out with the bathwater in this situation. So I need to know much more about the fate of the frogs who are taken from from Patagonia, brought to the zoo, and then returned. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the zoo's
Yeah, it's a complicated. One interesting thing about these particular frogs, the Darwin frogs, is that the males give birth. Did you catch that, Wendy? So
the female lay the eggs, don't they?
Yeah,
and
then they kind of go into the mouth of the
in the mouth of the male, and then he incubates them or whatever, and then he and you can see the tadpoles like
moving around in his throat.
It's incredible.
There's mouth-breathing fishes who do that too. Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I know we'll probably get into the end, although I'm enjoying this. I don't need to go anywhere right now, but like I said, I think these conversations are the conversations that we can have. And one of the reasons I write about them for the public is because most people have no idea about any of the issues about which we're talking. And it's not because they're dumb. It's just they don't. I mean, I know nothing about nuclear physics or economics or politics. So I like learning about it. And among the people who I hang out with who know what I do, we get into conversations like this. And I think for some of them, they've really been game changers, like, the presence of wolves here, the reintroduction of lynx, other animals around the world. And so, if your guiding principle is the life of every individual matters, and we can't just kill them for convenience or our convenience, then I think this is a perfect time, perfect time meaning, in the grand scheme of things, to have these sorts of conversations. Because they're not they're not simple. The simple fact is we don't kill individual animals because their lives matter. And then, of course, it just whatever.
Yeah, the simple fact is that nothing is simple. I think that's the main
thing. I agree there too.
Yeah. So Wendy, I think we're probably out of time. Do you think?
Yeah, we're coming to that. I was just going to say with that complexity in mind, it's. Oh, I don't think it was that one. It was the next one. Jack said. Sorry.
Before you go though, I see Deb just writes so much for nature having strict gender roles. Constructed. So I need to tell you this. I don't know if you can see it. I just got this book. There's a new book out called Feminism in the Wild: How Human Biases Shape Our Understanding of Animal Behavior by Ambika Kamath and Melina Packer. And the reason I'm suggesting this, I just interviewed them for Psychology Today. And the reason I'm raising this, and I really thank Deb for raising this, is there are gender differences. I'm not going to say there are gender differences among us here, but there definitely are gender differences in terms of people's views on how we interact and treat other animals. But to me, as an ethologist and a field worker, I've been fighting this for years with some people. A lot of what we're learning about non-humans is male biased. And this feminism in the wild shows, for example, that in wolves, but no. So, for example, the wolves of Yellowstone, Rick McIntyre has been studying them for years. He's got well over 100,000 sightings. And his newest book is that, if you will, females tend to run the show. And I'm not saying that in any way as an anti-male kind of view, but there are gender biases for sure in conservation decisions. And years ago, I cannot find the study. I've tried, and I know it was a refereed study, which of course doesn't mean anything because so much science that's refereed is a lot of crap anyway, but where men saw domination, women saw cooperation in different societies of animals. And so I'm just throwing that out, that certainly within the, and maybe that gets back to the question or the statement that guy made in Australia, that compassionate conservation sounded really feminine. And I said, well, thank you. And the bottom line of the story was he kept waiting for a discussion and people were laughing. And he said, do you have anything more to say about it? And I said, no.
Just dismissed him with humor. One thing that comes to mind on that, it's kind of a bit left field really in the conversation, but even in the movement, there's a gender issue because I've seen people talking about, well, you know, everyone's always talking about the macerated chicks, the males, and everybody's talking about the veal calves, the males, you know. And so in terms of the overall picture of those user industries, there's a lot of focus in a weird way on the plight of the males, whereas with the females who are kind of like exploited and used for longer, they're almost like in the background. So there's another weird kind of way of looking at it there.
Yeah, I do you know what I think that comes down to the fact that the calves and the chicks are babies, though. I think that's the play on not so much the maleness, but more the infantness of those fellow animals, I would say, because people, it's like, oh, look at these beautiful, gorgeous little.
Yeah, but there's another weird thing there, though, Wendy, isn't there? The fact that, you know, the maceration's been really a problem, and yet in a sense, I mean, this is a difficult thing for vegans to say, but you know, a male chick just out of the egg, as it were, on the conveyor belt, straight into the mincer, not barely sentient, but you know, in terms of their experience of suffering, it's kind of really kind of pretty quick and over and done with. And I know that doesn't excuse anything morally. It's just that compared with years and years and years of forced pregnancy, having your baby taken away, you know, bodily autonomy kind of violated, you know, several times a day, and this kind of stuff. You know, there is a difference, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a massive difference, and I suppose it's not to get into like comparing and going for the whole suffering Olympic thing as well, isn't it? But it's, yeah, and I can see definitely what you're saying, and I think, yeah, female suffering and women's issues generally in human worlds and in other animals' worlds definitely just seems more normalized and more acceptable, more easily able to kind of let it wash over you, for sure. I think that's the impression you get with this stuff, isn't it? And definitely that feminism in the wild. Who wrote that book?
So her
Marc?
name is Ambika Kamith. And Lucy Cook, who's in the UK, wrote a wonderful a book 2 years ago called Bitch. And what they're doing is, I mean, you can look at it purely academically if you want. I don't. I think there's a lot more going on. But how Darwin and other traditional evolutionary biologists, and I'm an ethologist, so I study animal behavior, had really just sort of sidelined the importance of females in their respective species, their social organization, their social behavior, et cetera, et cetera. So Lucy Cook's, if you go online and just do a search for Bekoff bitch, oh, that sounds terrible. But
never thought I'd be Googling that, to be fair, Marc.
Bekoff bitch psychology today, or Bekoff Ambika, Ambika. You'll see an interview I did with Ambika last year. So I just got the book. It's coming out in 2 weeks. But it's really it's so important because I'm an ethologist and I love to study social organization. And for years, it was clear to me, just from being a field worker, that females were equally or more important than males. And everybody can go, well, of course they were. Well, yeah, of course they were. But the Ambika and Lucy's work is it's monumental. It's paradigm shifting because it's just showing the importance of females and males in the social structure of their groups. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant.
And yet Carrie Wren said, "I love bitch. I have bitch." Oh, read it right away, Corey. They're both outstanding books. I mean, they're lovely women, and I love what they're doing because they are really arguing for a paradigm shift in the general field, the evolution of social behavior. Look where we've gone! My goodness.
So we're probably going to have to go. I want to object to being sworn at by Jeremy. I mean, that's... That's disgrace. I don't know. You know.
Well, I don't...
By the way, everyone, it's Jeremy's vegan anniversary today, 11 years.
Doesn't count. Doesn't count.
It doesn't count now. You've called Roger a utilitarian, Jeremy. Yeah. That is fighting talk.
Is it Jeremy the ape?
Yeah, Jeremy the ape.
Yeah.
I was going to congratulate you, Jeremy, but forget it now.
And I see So
Mark's your card now.
Another great is Amelia has a wonderful book coming out. I did an interview with her for her first vegan book, and I think I wrote a blurb, for. She has a new version coming out in April. So great.
Yeah, she was on the show a couple of weeks ago, Marc. Actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she's coming back. She's coming back for part 2 in a couple of weeks. So.
Wow.
I'll send you the link. You can you can tune in. You can switch roles.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Well, thank you all for coming. No, this is great. I love these discussions. They're so wide ranging. And
we always love coming on your show, Marc.
On your show. Yeah. No, Marc, it's brilliant. Thank you so much. Honestly, I know we all could just sit here chit-chatting away, and I'm sure the people in the chat would just stick with us because it's just been such a fascinating chat. Wow. I've got so many questions now, and going back to the chicks, and Jeremy had a few comments about the chicks and the calves, which I think is really brings it back to that violence, and it's more like
doesn't count. Those don't.
We're not counting anything you say now, Ape. I'm afraid that's the way it's going down.
Right. Well, I suppose we ought to let you do your nursing duties, Wendy. So I'd like to thank everybody for staying with us, tuning in, and sticking with us. Obviously, thanks to Marc for being a brilliant guest panelist as ever. And in another couple of years, Marc, you'll be back, I'm sure. So
sooner, I hope.
Oh, not that long.
So I have I just finished a young adult teen book on animal emotions. Which
when is it coming out?
I'm not sure, but I'm excited because that's such a great age cohort, and Jane Goodall and I are writing a young kids book now for 4 to 6 year olds, I think. So that should satisfy all of us, because we should all strive to be 4 to 6 year olds.
Oh, definitely. Grow old, but never grow up. That's my motto.
Yeah, people say, "Did you grow up in in New York?" And I said, "No, I haven't grown up yet. I hope I don't."
Yeah. So, and you had a second edition of your Emotional Lives of Animals out, didn't you?
Yeah, it came out a couple of months ago, and it's a radical revision. I mean, it really is. It's not just the first edition times 2. I added around 300 references, and it's much more. I don't like the word radical. I mean, the first one called for the end of using animals, but this one I think has a lot more personal appeal too. That we have to stop listening to people say things like, "Well, we really don't know." We know. We know other animals are sentient. We know they have feelings. We know we shouldn't be wantonly harming or killing them. So cut the bullshit and just stop doing it. How's that for an end?
Simple. If everyone does that, that'd be great. Perfect. Yeah, thanks.
So anyway, well, thank you all for coming. If you have questions, pop me an email and tell me when you're having more programs. These are fun.
No, they are.
We've actually got a couple of them. We actually know when our next show is, which is unusual, isn't it? So
well, when you can email me or text me. I don't have anything to write on.
The next one's the 10th of March, which is John and Jane back.
Okay.
We've got John and Jane Changemakers too, and then we've got Emmy back 2 weeks after that. Marc, I'll send you the links.
Yeah, do that. That would be great. So anyway, wherever you are, I hope you have a good afternoon, and a good evening.
And to you,
I suppose. So thanks, but really, thanks a lot for having me. If you have any questions, pop me an email, because it's always easy answers to these questions.
Yeah, just cut the bullshit and stop doing it.
Any last thoughts, or should we go?
Any last thoughts? I don't know. It's a beautiful day. I'm going out on a long bike ride.
Yeah, you jump on your bike and we'll finish the show.
On my bike, and you can jump in your beers or whatever. So thank you all. Love you all. Take care.
Thank you, Marc. Thank you.
Thanks, Marc.
Bye-bye. And enjoy your